Hello again, I'm Liz Smith, the Creative and Social Inclusion Officer at Recreate. This workshop, I'm going to guide you through a process of sculpting each other. So again, we're sticking with that portraiture theme, and just to remind you again, the reason we've chosen a sort of portraiture theme, and it'll be abstract portraiture as well, it's just to allow you to look at each other and to connect with each other. So it's a very straightforward, lovely way of spending time looking at each other, talking about old photos as a talking point and a way to get to know each other and connect. And that is in itself intergenerational. So we will be mixing traditional fine art materials with non-traditional fine art materials. I have air drying Das clay here, which you might be familiar with. It's quite a popular brand. So it's 1 kg. I would guess that it might roughly make about half a head size. So you're looking for a small little sculpture. Don't be intimidated by that at all. In terms of it being a traditional fine art material, you may never have used anything like this before. But the thing is to approach it with a sense of play and fun. Clay is lovely and sensory. We're going to combine it with reuse materials. Recreate obviously houses a lot of reuse materials, and we promote process and curiosity about those materials. Process being that we don't dictate, or in our workshop, we don't try and dictate the end look of what you're making. It's not prescriptive. The creativity is coming from you, and the journey is the most important thing. So it really doesn't matter what, don't be critical about what you're doing. Have fun, and it really is how you feel about it. So allow yourself to enjoy it. These materials that we have, the reuse materials, this I think was used for vials in a science lab, and there's loads of funky colours like pink and a nice red one and a yellow that's attached to this container. And so I'm not going to use them for vials in a science lab, but I can reuse them for something else. I'm going to creatively reuse them. And I'm not quite sure how I'll do that yet. I grabbed them because I really like the idea of having a very playful, illustrative, fun, cartoonish sculpture that perhaps is a little bit different from traditional sculptures. Yes, I might use these as a stand, a base for the head and the shoulders, but I might not. I don't know yet. So other reuse materials I grabbed are these deodorant button things. I don't quite know what they are. That's what I call them. I think they're from deodorant lids, and they've got a cool little spiky shape to them. So to me, they always remind me of little beetles or little bugs. They could be used for abstract art purposes. I have some other colourful lids from Recreate. So what could you use them? It's about having a look and using your imagination and thinking, what could I use these for? They could be eyes, noses, they could be jewellery, a decoration on a hat, a brooch. These are squishy, we call them rubber fingers. We don't know what they're for. They look a bit sciencey as well. They're expandable and compressible, and they are transparent. I've used them for making caterpillars before, but they could be used for finger painting as well. Corks, which might be good even for like making the shape in the face. So like your eye socket is kind of sunken. So if you just prodded that into your clay, that might quickly make that sunken look. Yeah, that whole act of looking at each other is really great. So even if it's not representative, you might just capture a part of them. You might capture, you've really like nailed their eyes there. You've definitely got the nose shape right, or even more exaggerated, and that's enough. That'd be brilliant. And yeah, painting afterwards could be quite fun, like make rosy cheeks or freckles or whatever comes to mind. I think I've covered all the little bits and bobs I have here at the moment, so probably might try and unearth other things like jewellery. So as I said, I don't really know how my sculpture is going to unfold. Stick with me and hopefully it'll be fun and you'll enjoy the process. So making of the clay head. Now, I actually made one that is a bit too difficult that I'm not happy with. So I'm going to make a simpler one. And I'm just going to show you that though, because I think it's important to show my process and when and where I make errors. I mean,
Don't get me wrong, I've been teaching for a couple of decades, but you know, still I hadn't done clay in years, and I was thinking that this could be quite simple. I could break it down, and it being small could be manageable, and now that I've done it, I realise actually it's probably a bit too hard, but I do want to show it to you, particularly for those who might have a lot or some art training. Now, her head went backwards because it was either going to go forwards or backwards, and I had forgotten, because I hadn't done it in so many years, that actually an armature, so that's a structure within this, is quite useful, so that you would have a structure maybe of wood to the height of the figure that you want, and you would mold around it, and that would give you your bone structures. But because this doesn't have any bones, the weight was laying it over. But I do quite like actually how it turned out, which is the beautiful thing about making mistakes and going with a process. And I was adding in bits of reuse, so bits of jewellery that I have lying around. I don't wear too much jewellery these days. A little earring, a necklace. I like this, the base that I've used. This is from Recreate. I would clean this up, and I would quite like to finish this and paint it if I get the time. But just to show you one that I won't be showing you how to make, but it's something that perhaps those of you who are feeling a bit ambitious could go more sculptural with it. So that's the clay I have left, and I'll just show you what to give you a gauge at what length this is. So that is 18 centimeters, or just this base that I'm working off, or 7 inches, right? Now, to give you a bit of scale, you will be sharing a pack of clay between you. So this is roughly, I would say, a third, and I used 2/3 with the sculptural bit. Using a plastic bag is good once you've opened the pack, and put it in a plastic bag and keep it wet, or cling film. Get yourself some water, so you can have a cup of water or a glass of water or whatever, a little container, because you want to be keeping this wet while you're working with it and moulding it. So what I'm going to look at maybe is doing a clay mask-like piece. So I'm going to put that to one side as well, because this, you know, I might need some of this for the base of the head, but this might work as well for the features. But I'm putting it away for the moment to keep it wet and just start working with this block. And it takes a while to mould, so stick with it. Be patient, but not just patient. Try to enjoy the sensory feel of it. It's a bit of fun. I think for this bit, you could be looking at each other, ideally. You can refer to a photo. You could be looking at each other, though. And it makes it more lively, as I said before, and more playful. Now, I am using, not the ideal base, I am using a little bit of wood. Ideally, you'd have something with a bit of grip on it. So if it were a bit of wood with a grain on it, that this can cling to, but this is sliding off because there's some sort of veneer on the top, you know. And I didn't want to use cardboard or anything underneath it, because obviously that soaks up a lot. So you don't want it to be too absorbent, but you want it to be not too slippy either, your surface. So yeah, it doesn't have to be ambitious at all, this. It can be just a little, you do a small circle, a little mound. So if we think about it almost that we're trying to start off with a semi-sphere. So a sphere being a 3-dimensional circle, or an egg or an oval shape, if you can manage that. And you can use both hands. Obviously I have an arm, like, you know, I have a disability, so I'm using it to the best, not just the best of my abilities, to my advantage, because it will give me a rounded shape. But use both your hands to sort of try and mould out something of a mask shape. It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just slowly sort of shaping it up. So you do need a little bit of patience with this, even though we're not doing much. A little bit of patience. And with all the workshops, don't take them too seriously. You know, art should be play and fun. So we all get frustrated, yeah, and it's just about not being what would you say, quietening your inner critic, in order to just enjoy and play. The other thing with combining reuse materials with this is that you could use the reuse materials for mark making. You could use different types of tools for mark making. You could even use a pencil for, I'm saying to you, perhaps allow this to be a portrait, but it can be anything. We'll provide the materials, and it's totally up to you what you do with it. These are guidelines to show you how you might use them, and show you how you might use a sort of intergenerational theme, just as something as simple as spending time together looking at each other, which is fun. And also, you don't have to make the other person absolutely beautiful, so suspend your inner critic on that, because it's very hard. It's pressure then on the other person to make somebody look amazing. So just allow yourselves to have a bit of fun. If they're caricatures, cartoons, I actually would encourage you to be more like simple with this and sort of do a cartoon version or a caricature of each other. So at least I've got like a sense of flatness now, and but flat obviously at the base, and then I'm getting a rounded bit on top. So that's good, that's positive. And I'm just going to try and work in to shaping this other side. Now, when I'm shaping this other side, I'm also getting my finger in there to sort of break up the shapes that I don't want. So it's a process of sometimes breaking down. Also sometimes to get water in there. If you feel there's harder bits, mine's been sitting to one side. So particularly as well, if you don't want to do this in one sitting, if you want to come back to this, you could just overlay this with cling film. Make sure it's nice and wet on top, and make sure the cling film is nice and clingy and tight. So I'm coming up with a basic sort of face shape. Now, I would say concentrate on it just being, for the moment, a little nod to your home share partner, in terms of looking a little bit like them or representing them in some way. Okay, so I'm happy with my base. Now if you are into clay, you might happen to have some bits around, so feel free to use whatever you have. Joe kindly lent me some of these bits of, I am curious to use them. So these are bits that they're a different type of, I hope they haven't dried up as well. Different type of clay. They're obviously coloured. Now we might not be able to get hold of that for you. If we can, we will. But even afterwards, I would encourage you to be quite kitsch about this. Kitsch as in perhaps a little bit tacky, or it doesn't have to be tasteful. It can be funky and bright coloured and fun. Like for instance, the nose could be pink and the ears could be purple. So it could be a little bit like them, and then it can, you could pick out, maybe each of you like to wear a particular colour or pattern, and maybe this is in the face. Now, I'm going to work on the nose. I'm tempted to try this. So let's say if you don't have this, if we don't know how this is going to work out. So if you don't have these other colours, you will have your grey, white DAS clay, and you will mould your nose. So look at your face. Think about what's protruding. Feel your own face. So you could close your eyes and touch your own face, and you just get to know the human face, where the lumps and bumps are. Your chin is rounded, your mouth is rounded, your cheeks are rounded, your nose is rounded. What are the bits that sort of stick inwards? Maybe the sides of your mouth. I'm not sure about this stuff. It's interesting though. I don't think it's gonna sit in with it, or if it does, it might be awkward. Your forehead sometimes sticks out. So everyone has obviously a different face, and there's general sort of face shapes, but there'll be different variants on that. Obviously your ears. So I'm thinking mainly it's going to be the nose, mouth, cheeks, chin, maybe forehead and eyebrows, because your eyes sink back from your face. Your eyes are sort of quite sunken back. So even you could start by sinking back the eyes here, and we could give you a reuse tool of some sort to do that with. I'm going to grab a random thing, like a little bottle, and push in. I'll show you this in a second. Now about halfway, I haven't quite done that right, but about halfway down the head is where the eyes sit. So I'll give you a few little guidelines about face shape. I've probably gone a little bit too high, I think, here, but I can try and move that down and mold it back up. So yeah, even stuff around your house, little bottles, lids. You have set even a little bit of clay aside to the side and play around with impressioning, putting impressions into the clay, or how the shape will affect the clay. So you can have like your piece of experimental clay beside you. Like when I'm drawing, this looks like an alien at the moment, but you'll get the idea, you know, or Spider-Man. When I'm drawing or painting or whatever, it's nice to have a tester sheet by the side to test out your pencils and to test out your colours before you put them down. So likewise with the clay, you could do that. So I'm just put a bit of water on my finger to soften this up here. And you can always change it. That's the thing. If you want, it's wet clay, so it can be molded in so many different ways. So you don't have to commit to anything that you do. So they're nearly halfway. I think they're a little bit too high up the head, the eyes. But I'm gonna leave them as they are. The ear, just to say then, once you're putting in the nose almost sits again halfway between the is it the eyebrows? Yeah. No. Halfway between the eyes and the chin. So your nose might be there, and then halfway between your nose and the chin sits your mouth. And that's all rough. It's all different per person, right? And then your ears would be halfway between your eyes and your nose, or your ears. Yeah, I'm still not sure about this clay, but right, I'm not putting these in for this. It's just too different. The clays are too different. It's not going to work, I don't think. I would love to, but that colour is sort of what I mean, that you can be quite punchy with what you use. Just to show you a little bit about if you were to use reused materials for mark making, how you might use them. Now we will endeavour, as I said, to give you some tools that are more traditional maybe, but they could be reused in terms of just a knife or something like that to cut the clay. But even if you had, like I have this, some people call it astroturf, or this fake grass, what would it look like if you were to impress that into it? Would you get an interesting pattern? I don't know. It's quite interesting. Okay, I'll just see if I can show you that a bit more closely. So there's quite a grassy texture to it. There's another texture on the other side. See that? Then you could smooth that over and maybe test out another texture. So we have these funky looking little buttons which have jaggedy, opposite side which is jaggedy, but you know, what impression could that give you? So if you wanted to veer away from the actual traditional portraiture and you wanted to actually just do something way more abstract, you could experiment with mark making in the clay. And there you have, pardon me, yeah, cool mark actually. And what could that be? That could be an eye if you wanted to do it like that. Very abstract, a bit alien looking, or that could be a nose shape as well. So there, you know, you're really simplifying things for yourself, but it's quite effective. I like it. So it's much more about sort of patterns that sit on top rather than molding and sculpting. Yeah. What would the other side look like? Let's just dig that in. You could also just do something like leave that in these objects. We'll give you a few of these and a few other little things with little lids there, but they could look quite interesting in terms of if they were actually part of the face, rather than the impression being the face. What if that just stayed in the face? But there you go, another different sort of look. So there, that would be really nice for hair. If you weren't interested in maybe sticking a reused material on, well, maybe the impression of this into something shaped a bit like hair would be nice. That, like the side of that could be cool as well. Something similar, actually. So you're running this down. Whoops. I like that. Very straightforward. Yeah, and you could leave that in the clay. That has a different pattern on the side. You could use that impression. Or you could use the side again. It's a sort of a little track there. So yeah, it might not end up being a portrait at all. It might be something to do with your interest. It could be a story from childhood. It could be related to playing in the muck, and mark making, something similar to that. Really, there are no rules. So I'm going to smooth that out again and wet it up. Make sure it's not getting too dry. And I have a sort of an eye impression moulded out. Now, there's nothing too much more that I think I need to mould out of the skull. It's more building up from there on. You might want to exaggerate that a little bit more if you like. And that brow is good. You could build up the brow if you want. Now already, once you press in, it's like there's cheeks that are coming out. But you could mould out even further. If you're a woman, but men have good cheekbones too, but a lot of women have particularly full cheeks. It seems to be a characteristic of a woman's face. Okay, so as I said already, with that you're getting a sort of protrusion, natural sort of protruding look for the cheeks, but I think if we build that up a bit more, it'd be cool. So how will I sculpt the nose? Sort of thinking like a triangle to start. Everyone's nose is different. People can be very critical of their noses. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it is such a defining feature, and some people don't like if they have biggish noses, but I think they look nice. This is too long, so you could use a knife. You could use some of this material, which is didn't really help. I don't want to press too much in while it's on top of the face, because I don't want to, there's a bit of grass in the face. That's no good. Or maybe it is. Yeah, I don't want to press too much when it's on top, because everything underneath it will press down. So I don't want to apply too much pressure to the nose. It's not stuck down yet, so if I need to take it back up, I can as well. Stuck down as in I haven't really pressed it in or molded it down. Just going to mold that out a bit more. If your sculpture ends up looking a bit like Morph, which mine might. Do you remember Morph? He used to be on a lovely art show, wasn't it? What was it called? It was Tony Hart was the presenter. I forget what the name of the show was. And he used to do lovely children's art, but he was a lovely artist as well, and he seemed like a nice soft man, gentleman. And he had funky music on, and Morph would appear, the little plasticine guy. He has his own show now, I think. He was rebooted. But even if it's something as simple as Morph, well, that's brilliant. So I'm using the back of my nail to sort of push this part of the clay, the nose, into the bottom part. So sort of slightly moulding it in. And that's just an instinctive technique, but I guess if you're moulding something separately and you're wanting it to sit onto something, the two need to converge. The two bits of clay need to converge. So that's just one way of making it converge. Now it's all very wet. The other thing is very handy to have an old top or cloth or tea towel beside you. If it gets too wet, just wipe your hands. thinking it would be nice to listen to music. In the next video that we do on portraiture, based on portraiture as well, but a different style, it's going to be collage. There's a little giveaway. I really encourage you to listen to classical music while you are creating organic and imaginary shapes. But it's always nice to listen to music if you're doing something. I think it increases your sense of relaxation. So sometimes you have to sort of clean off some of the, like almost wipe away some of the clay. I'm doing that with my finger because I don't want to get, like if I was to use a cloth, there's potential to get some threads in there that I don't particularly want. So yeah, I just think a bit of time spent sort of smoothing and thinking and reshaping and molding is worthwhile. I'll try not to do that too much, but I'll do a little bit of it. So I think it would be nice to do this over an evening personally. And then obviously you're going to have to wait for it to dry, and then you're going to have to, well, ideally you'd like to maybe paint it afterwards. I would recommend using acrylic paint with it. Or you could try out your ceramic markers. You could combine both. Do a little tester again. Allow a bit to dry. A little tiny little bit, smaller than that, just a fraction or everything. Just that you can experiment with a couple of different colours. So you could experiment this with the ceramic paint markers that you get in the first workshop. The only thing that would put me off using those would be that there's a limited amount of colour there, and perhaps they're too bold, the colours. I would be sort of veering personally more towards some pastels, like to include some white in there. You could mix white in with the markers, I guess, experiment. Also, they can be mixed together, but you do need to work a little bit quickly with that. Now I want to build up the cheeks just a tiny bit more. I don't want too much. And I want to make sure it's nice and sort of wet and moldable before I attach it to the face. So I'm just going to push that out a little bit. If I flatten that quite a bit with my fingers and I'm sort of pushing in water into it at the same time, that'll make it more malleable. So anyhow, I'm going to just mold on some curvier cheeks. Somewhere it'll sit down and get a bit more water on my finger. It's like doing plastic surgery. I go into it now. And all the while you'll be having fun, sipping away maybe, and looking at each other and figuring out, and maybe ask the other person to describe their features. That way you won't say anything that they'll be offended by. If you say, oh, you've got a nice Roman nose. Oh no, they might be offended by that. So. And I've done a lot of portraiture workshops, and people can be really critical. And just use this time to appreciate yourself. Appreciate your lovely, unique face. Appreciate each other's lovely, unique face, and hopefully lovely, unique personalities. And that you can spend time just enjoying each other's company and appreciating each other. Those are the cheeks. Fabulous cheeks. They remind me of Pete Postlethwaite. It's a bit random, but he's got amazing cheekbones, that actor. Yeah, I mean, they're not totally symmetrical. I haven't spent loads of time worrying about that, and I'm not going to worry about that, okay? It's good enough. Now, the chin is rounded. So although this is rounded, it's quite flat. So I think it needs to come up more. The mouth tends to come up more as well. So we need to sculpt it up a little bit as well. And once that's done, like we've a lot of the face done, I would say the mouth is one of the trickier ones. Then we'll go do the eyes, and then, so we're nearly finished this part, I would say. I say we, you know. You might, you know, I would advise with all of these, well, particularly this and the last one, is to don't do this. Don't do the workshop while you're looking at this video. Look at the video or even chop between it. Look at a bit and come back to it. But don't look at this while you're doing your own work, because you won't be enjoying yourselves and you won't be looking at each other enough. You'll be looking at this video. You don't need too many things going on at the one time. So look at a bit of the video. If once you get enough information that you feel you can make a start at it, make a start. Put it on pause. Get to work yourselves and switch on a bit of music and just have a nice evening. I'm using the back of my nail, my nail, but I'm using it this way, right? To sort of try to push the bit of extra clay I put in there, the chin, to push the chin in. Okay. I mean, I could keep molding that up. It's starting to shape up. I would say do keep molding it up, molding it, sculpting it upwards, outwards. What else? Okay, squeeze off a bit of this. So it can take some time, and it will take some time for you to start getting a feel for this clay and feeling comfortable with the clay. So just allow yourself the time if you can. Even if you just spend one session sort of getting to know the clay and not making anything, if that works for you, if you have the time, that'd be brilliant. And again, you don't have to, you can make something and then squish it up and keep it wet and put it back in the bag. So now I have finished, I think, the chin, I believe, and now I'm gonna do the mouth. And I should have enough here at the side. I quite like the size of this because I think it's not too ambitious, but it gives you enough room to do something. Because if it's too small, it's going to be too fiddly, I think. So let me just show you. So that's about 10 centimeters. And what's that in inches? If I can give it in inches, that is like roughly maybe 4 inches. So I'm just shaping up, wetting up and shaping up a bit of clay again, and I guess I try and make it, as I said before, malleable, moldable, squishable, so to push it out and make sure as much of the clay gets wet as possible, that it's moldable. And you can do that in any way. I'm just shaping it up along here, whatever suits you. I'm going to squish it back together now, just mold it into my fingers. And I might roll it out. I don't quite know. Again, I'm not going to do like a very exact mouth. It's going to be like a suggestion of a mouth, or more like that sort of general shape, like a mound. So I just have a shape like that, and I'm going to put that down and see how I can mold it. So that sort of sits away from the chin. Okay, so give your mouth a feel, maybe close your eyes, and again just see how it comes, how its shape relates to the nose, how the shape of the around the mouth relates to the chin, as in, does it curve up, how is it curving away from different areas of the face, how is it curving away from the cheeks, what's the shape. So now you're welcome to do your own faces, but I think it's quite nice. I think it's a lovely bonding experience if you were to do each other, if you were to sculpt each other. Now, so there are lots of little, if you like, minute features that you could be putting in if you want, like the Cupid's bow between your nose and your lip. The details of the lip, if you have an indentation in your chin, like I have a little dimple in my chin, or dimples in your cheeks. The final hurdle, I'm just tweaking. Okay, I'm happy enough, I think, with that as a basic face. I'm going to put away this extra clay. You could do a neck if you want, but I quite like the look of it just being a head. So now, if I were to combine, I'm going to combine some reused materials with this. And I'm going to start with the beads. I'm going to have a look at the beads now. I'm going to take a little handful out and put them to the side here. So I'm pressing in some white to start, because obviously there's the white of the eye. You could start with whatever. So I'm going to do 2 that are like sitting in the inner corner of the eye to start. Sorry, now it's going to be hard to see what I'm doing sometimes because my hand is going to get in the way. I'm just building it up and see what's what. So that's 3 in there now. I might put in a blue. I like that. So then I'm going to, that's just going to be the whole of the iris, and I'm going to put, so it all gets very fiddly, white around that. But if you were doing something bigger, it wouldn't be so fiddly, so maybe it's worthwhile doing something bigger. Try to show you that now. It's a bit strange, but I like it. At least it's adding colour, and it's kind of interesting. It's something different to use reuse materials in with clay. So you're combining the traditional art materials with the untraditional, and that's kind of cool and funky and playful. It's not totally symmetrical, but it's grand, okay? Cool. Right, I'm going to mould ears, yep. With ears, I tend not to start off very precious. Just something that looks vaguely like an ear, and slap it on there between the eye and the nose, and then sure, you just get moulding thereafter. And little tools could be quite handy for this bit as well. A little knife just to flatten it. Now I'm going to do the other ear. Hopefully get a bit of symmetry going on. Just a touch, not that nobody is symmetrical, least of all me. And just to get a touch though. Okay, I'm doing this backwards, obviously upside down. This particular bit of clay has a nice consistency off it. It's not too damp, it's not too dry. Goldilocks clay. So that's, I mean, something like that is grand just for basic. It's not nothing detailed. It's not, you know, you could go way more detailed. I just want the idea of an ear, suggestion of an ear. What else could help me with this in terms of tools? Even a little bit of this tool could help. Just pat it down. So I want to differentiate the ear from the face. Obviously it's at quite a different angle from the face, and it looks very separate obviously normally, but with this it's, I'm gonna have to turn this around to me to get a better look at this, what I'm doing. Okay, makes a big difference actually. Sometimes when you look forward, when you look the right way up, sometimes with drawing I encourage people to draw upside down. Obviously it's a good little exercise as well to train your eye, but not just for that reason. When something just isn't looking right to you, it's just, if you're drawing straight up and something isn't looking right, it can be just another way to look at it, and it can often benefit your drawing. So I'm sure obviously the same goes for sculpting, but right at the moment the right way up is working for me. Okay, look, I'm not going to go too mad on this because I don't want to bore you too much. I might tinker a little bit with it, I'll see. But that is your basic face there, okay? And then I could think about adding a few more reuse materials. I have this little, it's a part of off an earring. And I have a couple of fake pearls. So that looks kind of cute actually. Now I only have one of those. I have more of these angular bits, which I love. These came on a necklace, and one of them I put in the other sculpture, and I like them. I just really like it. So I think I would go with them. I think they look cool. If there's a way I can sort of push them in, I might need to add more, even more clay there, or I go sort of above the ear and dig in. I can try that and do it here as well, and I'll be sort of covering it up in fabric. So this is an old earring that I'm using to make marks. This will be really, I think, quite nice when you paint over it, paint in little eyebrows. So we will wait patiently for my lady to dry, and then we will get lots of nice colour on her. Now, I might just recap in a second just to talk about how to get her off this board. I'm going to attempt to take this up before it dries. It might work out fine. As I say, it's not particularly the most porous surface, but I would prefer to get it onto a plastic bag. So I'll set the plastic bag on this as soon as I get it up. I doubt it's going to come off perfectly smooth, particularly with around the ears. I think that'll be a bit of an issue. But my fear is that so I'm taking it off with a knife. My fear is that if I take it off tomorrow or when it's dry, obviously be very careful with this and push the blade away from yourself if you're doing this. I mean, you might do this sooner than I have, and that before you put on any reuse materials, and that way it might be a bit easier. No, nearly done, I think. Well, okay, it's coming up anyway, isn't it? It's moving. So with the middle of the knife, taking the weight, the length, hopefully I can pick it up. No, okay, very well. Okay, here. Right, I'm just going to sit that on top. And I feel like that's a better solution. Now at this point you could add in hair if that, if you're going to do maybe this plastic, you could maybe push it into it, or you can let it dry. Either or. Okay. Okay, so there's the little head. I guess the next step is painting. Paint the face. I'm going to use acrylic just because I am working from home and that's what I have to hand. Probably in the name of reuse, it might be nice for us to send you some of our paints that we have in stock, which are household paints, and I think they will work fine. And then we'll think about what I'm going to adhere to her, whether I'll adhere these pink. I quite like the idea of that. But if you're doing that yourself, I would advise, let's say if you wanted to adhere these strips like for hair, I would probably, in retrospect, advise you to do that while the head is wet. I have a glue gun, but I don't think that's something we can provide you with, unfortunately, sorry. Other thing would be, there's different types of glue that could work. Even, I'd give PVA a go. I don't think it will be the best for fabric, some of the lighter fabrics, or wood glue would be pretty good. So I'll start with mixing some paint. Now the paintbrushes, I just dug out quickly. They're probably a lot of what I have is actually watercolour paintbrushes, but these are sort of thicker ones, so you don't necessarily need something like this, certainly not with the angle, but I just chose it because it's quite stiff. And then the smaller paintbrush here. I'm going to just start off with a skin colour, so a light skin colour, pinky skin colour. So I'll move her head to the side for a sec. So when you're mixing a lighter skin tone, you would use a lot of white as your base. For darker skin tones, if you're mixing brown from the primary colours, so a lot of sets, if you had a set at home for instance, come with the primary colours, and they all mix to create brown. So obviously blue and yellow are green, red and yellow are orange, blue and red are purple, and then brown is red, blue and yellow. And you will get different degrees of brown depending on the mixture, particularly with the red and the blue balance. Blue is going to be darker. If it's a very black skin tone, you would go heavier on the blue. Of course, you can use again a shorthand of dabbing a bit of black in, or a bit of brown, as I said, pre-made brown. And still with that, it doesn't mean that you would just need those three colours. You might still need, most likely, you will still need some white. So I'm just saying that for lighter skin tones, obviously you'll need lighter colours, i.e. More white. Or darker skin tones, I would start with some white and build it up slowly. You know, there is no shortcut, that's what I would say. It takes time. There is no magic formula to get the right skin tone, because or any colour, because every colour is so different. So I'm gonna put in all the primaries out there. Now, I imagine I will need red, a bit of yellow, and perhaps blue. I mean, blue, if you were painting, blue is always useful for the shadows on people's faces. So you would always use a certain amount of blue. But in this case, we'll be putting down flat colour. So it's better to add in less to start off. So I'm mixing up a good amount. I would always veer on the side of making a little bit too much than too little, because it's hard to remix for the same colour. So I'm adding in a little bit of red now. And try and mix it into the whole lot. A little bit more. So yeah, the red is going to be stronger, of course, as we know. It's a stronger colour. So I'll be more tentative about adding it. I quite like that skin tone. It is worth, even with this, I would suggest, and always with, if you were painting, to add a little bit to a piece of paper to test it before you put it down on your actual work. I like that. It's kind of like almost like a fake peachy colour. I'm mixing up a brown for the eyebrows. So at the moment that looks green, because I've got blue and yellow in there. So I'm going to mix in red. And for brown you need quite a lot of red. Painted freckles on her face and some more makeup and eyelashes and darker eyebrows. So she's quite sort of, you might think she probably looks a bit tacky and kitsch. And I sort of do too. But I like it. And so it's time to put on the hair. So as I showed you before, I have these, and actually I've marked her head, so that could be good. Or I have this wool. I quite like that, because that's kind of like, not that this is representative of me, but it's kind of like my curly red hair, and it could be quite funny because I have freckles in there, you know, typical of someone that's fair-skinned. So I think that looks quite groovy. So yeah, I'm gonna heat up a glue gun, and as I said before, ideally, if possible, stick the hair on, depending on what sort of hair. Certainly with this, if I was using this, put it on while the clay is still wet. Now, obviously, that means that it's just a bit trickier when it comes to painting, but that's fine. You know, with this sort of thing, if you're careful, even if you paint over it, you could sort of scratch the paint off, and it shouldn't be too hard, and it's kind of easy to get skinny brushes. You get them in packs, cheap packs for £3. So that's it. I also contemplated false eyelashes, and I might still do that. Just ones that I had hanging around, and thought could be quite add another little sort of tacky kitsch element. I've stuck my first bit on there. I'll show you now how I'm sticking it on. So I just thought, I'm sort of feeling my way with it. I cut off a smaller bit. I thought it looked quite 80s looking. I like the hair kind of coming down a bit like a dreadlock. So yeah, I could piece it. So you know, do this as you want. You don't have to just glue it on like that. Get a feel for it. So with the glue gun, yeah, I don't know I'll better decide what I'm going to do next rather than shoot ahead with gluing anything else on. So don't let it get too hot. I mean, it will get hot over time, but you can start when it's sort of lukewarm. And you know, this could be your alter ego, or you can just embellish and get creative and have a laugh with it, as I'm doing. This is like purely, this girl is, as you probably realize, is purely from my imagination. And yours can look way more abstract, and it could be, as I said before, it could be like a pink nose, a purple ears. It could be like a cartoon, more cartoonish. This is quite cartoonish in a way, but there's lots of different cartoony styles, and yours could be more cartoonish than this if you like. There's no judgment. The thing is to have fun and play. You know, I wouldn't say it's my finest work, but it's fun, and that's important as well, because sometimes, you know, as I said before, we're too critical, and when we're too critical, it can take the fun out of it. Maybe there's time for being critical, and there's a time for having fun, and this is certainly a fun project. So you can keep going like that, and I'll show you the finished piece. I won't drag you through the whole process of adding the hair on, but I think it's looking quite good, and she's looking particularly Irish and a bit 80s looking. I like it. Okay, so there she is. I hope you can see her all right in the light. I think it's gas. It's a bit of fun, and I like the fact that we've combined the clay with the reused materials and paint. And yeah, the wool, by the way, is from Avoca. So we get scraps of wool from Avoca, so that's just cool wool that looks like hair. So it's gas looking like a dolly. I hope you enjoyed this, and can't wait to see what you come up with. Thank you very much.